And welcome in. This Facebook Live interview on Zoom is presented by Live Casino Hotel, now open and taking all necessary safety precautions. Welcome in. I'm Stan the Fan Charles of PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. With me is my co-host, the old left-hander, Ross Grimsley. And it's taken us about, 15 or 18 weeks, Ross, to get around to this guy. He's everybody's favorite Oriole, the Demper. Number 24, Rick Dempsey. Rick, how are you?
I'm good. Stan, how are you?
I'm doing good. All things considered, I'm doing good. And I know Ross is doing good. Wonderful. But we miss seeing you here in town, Rick. We miss seeing you.
I'll tell you, I snuck in last week for 8 days. I spent 5 of them with my grandkids up in Philadelphia and then a couple of days back in Baltimore. And I just miss everybody and everything. I never thought I could miss it like this, but man, oh man, I'll tell you, to have no baseball really in our life other than watching what we watch on television is not a good thing. You got to be at that ballpark. You got to see it in person.
How much are you able to keep up with the team right now? And how surprised are you that they're 500 right now after 28 games? It's a team that lost 107 games last year, 115 the year before.
There's quite a few players, I think, that are really genuinely getting better. They're putting the numbers up on the board. I like the way they come from behind. They're not intimidated by any of the teams that they've been playing. They're doing some things now that they haven't done in a long time, but it seems like a little bit of a throwback. Seeing bunting, we're seeing a little hit and run, guys stealing some bases. I mean, this is like totally against all the things that these teams are trying to create now. Swing as hard as you can. If you strike out, don't worry about it. You'll get them next time. But the Orioles are doing a lot of things. I love Nunez, the way he goes the opposite way. Rios goes the opposite way. It's not as much as I thought everybody was going to get up there and try to pull the ball. That actually really fooled me and really sprayed the ball around and putting up some pretty big numbers against a couple of good ball players.
Rick, can you move a little closer to your computer? The mic's not picking you up a little bit. One player I want to ask you about, and then I know Ross has got some questions. We want to go deep into your history in Baltimore from 1976 on. But Anthony Santander, I'm wondering, did you see last year, because I got nervous when at the end of the year, his on-base percentage went under 300. Did you see a guy that could be this kind of force in that lineup, Rick?
Well, you know what? People have a tendency to judge too quickly in this game, too. Over the course of 1 year and a lot of pressure on that kid to be productive if he was going to get a chance to play every day, he kind of turned everything around. And I think now with a little confidence and regular playing time that he's had, he's showing what he's capable of doing. And that's all you really need to see. The guy looks like he's got a pretty good attitude. He plays hard. He's got the capability right-handed and left-handed. I haven't seen anybody swing the bat as good as Eddie Murray, but at least he's on the track to put up those kind of numbers. And he continues to swing like he's done just so far in this short season. He's been great.
Ross?
Fantastic. Well, Deborah, let's talk a little bit about you. I know people are interested in that. You got drafted by Minnesota, 15th round in 67. You're up and down. You made it to the big leagues in 2 years in 1970 with them. Then you were back and forth. You got traded to the Yankees. You were there for a couple of years, and lucky you're behind Thurman Munson. So my question to you, before you got traded here to Baltimore, did you start getting a little frustrated about not really, what do I got to do to stay here? Up and down, up and down. Then you go to New York. How were you feeling? What was your mindset?
Well, actually, Ross, I got to the big leagues in 1969 with Minnesota, 2 years out of high school.
Right.
I came right up out of A-ball. So that's when I started going up and down for a while. I didn't have enough experience really to stay at the major league level on a regular basis until I got with the Yankees. But along the way, as you know, if you talk to your pitchers, and we had some pretty good pitchers with Minnesota, Jim Cott, Jim Perry, Louis Tiant, guys like that. you talk to them for a while, you pick up and you learn things. And then I got traded to the Yankees, and you got Mel Stoudemire and Catfish Hunter, the two biggest guys on that in that rotation. And that's where I wanted to learn how to play the game and help pitchers from behind home plate. I knew I could throw, but I had to kind of be a little bit more consistent around the bags when I was throwing the ball. And I already knew how to block the ball and stuff like that. But calling ball games for those guys, the MVP guys and Cy Young Award winners, those kind of guys, I picked that up along the way. And I got my opportunity with Baltimore when I got traded there in '76. And so, you had to put up with Earl Weaver for a long time, and he was a tough guy to get along with. But actually, you kind of realized when you played for him that you better not make a whole lot of mistakes, because he's not going to let any stone go unturned if you're not doing it the right way, the Oriole way, the Earl Weaver way. And so, we had to put up with that attitude of his. But I think we were all better players for it. And that's where I really had an opportunity to play every day. And I had a lot of different kinds of pitchers. And you certainly were one of those kind of guys. Learned how to call ball games for guys like you. Otherwise, all we had to do was tell Earl, I can't throw to that guy. Earl would have gotten rid of me, So we had some good times together, and we developed a good winning attitude, and we had fun at the same time doing it.
Yeah, really. Obviously there was catching in your family. Now, I don't know.
Oh yeah, 5 people, 5 professional catchers.
Really? I mean, unbelievable. Is this something that as growing up that you wanted to be? You guys want to be a catchers, or how did that transpire? What happened with that?
Well, when I was I ran track my freshman and sophomore year because it was the only sport I could stay at. My brother would leave at a certain time at school, and I had to go with him. Otherwise, I had to run home for 12 miles, and that wasn't going to work. So anyway, catching was the most exciting position. I didn't like pitching because I couldn't throw the ball over the plate, but I had a good arm. I was wild. But I loved catching. And my cousin ahead of me, his name was Dick Young. His father was a Hall of Fame referee in professional boxing. I did a lot of Muhammad Ali fights. So I figured I wasn't too big. So I had to stick to baseball as my favorite sport. So now after my cousin Dick was a catcher, and I wanted to be a catcher because I kind of idolized him. And then after me, my nephew and my son both got into professional baseball. My brother Pat was a darn good catcher for Oakland and Baltimore at the same time. So we all just, whatever the family would get together, we talk about catching and how to block balls and how to throw guys out and how to be consistent and how do you work at it and what do you do and that sort of thing. And it was just something that kind of grew inside the family. We all loved being catchers.
That's great stuff. Rick, talking about Earl Weaver, and obviously we all chuckle when we talk about him, but what was it like when you got traded? We had Mike Boddicker on a couple of weeks ago, and Mike told us a story about when he got traded from the Orioles to Boston. He spent a half hour in his car by himself crying. When you got traded to the Orioles from the vaunted New York Yankees, what was your attitude like at first, and how long did it take you to really get into understanding Weaver?
Well, it took quite a bit of time, Stan, because I got traded from the New York Yankees, and we were 12 and a half games in first place at that time, halfway through that season. When the trade deadline came up, I was just so brokenhearted that I wasn't going to be able to stay with the Yankees and try to get a championship ring with them before I ended up getting traded. Didn't know a whole lot about the Baltimore Orioles. They were in second place in that division. And everybody always talked about how tough it was to play for Earl Weaver. But when I got traded to this ball club, the Orioles, they were on the road. So I joined them in Chicago. Earl Weaver said, I'll try to get you in the lineup when I can. But we went like on a 9-day road trip, and I never even got an at bat. So I was pretty depressed by the time I got into Baltimore. flew in there about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It was one of those nights where it was still 92 in the morning and 92% humidity. And they didn't have rollers on my bags in those days. So I had 2 suitcases, a couple hang-up bags, and another baseball bag. And I'm trying to drag that out. I'm at the corner of the freeway at 695 in York Road at the Best Western Hotel there. And I was really already pretty in a bad mood because I hadn't played a game yet in 9 days with the Orioles. Went to the hotel, and Hippie and all of us, we got our keys. I got my key, and we had to go across the parking lot with all that luggage and walk it upstairs to the 2nd story and then go down to the end of the hall, and I stuck my key in the door and the key didn't work. At that point, I had enough. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I took all my luggage down to the end of the hallway again, and I walked out to the stairway, and I threw it in the parking lot, and I sat up on the top step crying. I said, "Oh, Lord," I said, "is this what it's come to?" I said, "I haven't played in 9 days. I'm probably going to be out of baseball." I said, "You got to help me. Something's got to happen." The next day, I went to the ballpark, and I was in the lineup for the first time facing the Kansas City Royals, who were wearing the Orioles out, stealing bases and taking extra bases. Earl Weaver finally gave me a chance to play, and I threw out 3 guys: Amos Otis, George Brett, and Willie Wilson. And from that point on, I was pretty much the everyday catcher for the Orioles for the next 10 years.
Do you remember who you caught that night?
It might have been Ross. I'm not sure, but it might have been Ross or Jim Palmer, one or the other.
One or the other.
I can't remember when I did catch Jim in the first game, but that was my opportunity right there.
So let me ask you the big question about Baltimore. You told the story. Isn't it ironic, Ross? We got Boddicker crying when he's leaving Baltimore, and Dempsey's crying when he gets to Baltimore. But when you reflect now on what Baltimore has meant to you, in other words, that's 24 years in the 20th century and 20 years in the 21st century. That's 44 years. And other than the 4 or 5 years you went to Cleveland and LA and Milwaukee, it's all been involved with Baltimore baseball. Yeah. Could you have ever imagined what the city would mean to you and what you'd mean to the city?
Absolutely not. Getting an opportunity to play every day, things started to happen for me. And it wasn't that I came in and did such a great job offensively or anything like that, but defensively, I had to protect that. I had to do what I needed to do to be a good defensive player to help this pitching staff. And it was about pitching in Baltimore. They always had great pitchers and all different kinds of pitchers. You had Ross with the changeup and the screwball and all the. And he'd throw you a nice moving 2-seam fastball. Palmer would come in and blow guys away right over the top. Flanagan kind of had a little bit of both at the same time. And so kind of growing up with all those good young pitchers that the Orioles had was so much fun. And we started to win a lot of ball games. Now, Brooksy was still there at the time, and Paul Blair was still playing center field. So you got to see Mark Belanger at short. You got to see what Oriole baseball was really all about. And it was the fundamentals of the game that made our defense so strong. And then the pitchers always had good mechanics. They knew how to work fast, change speeds, to use all their pitches. And so it was quite an eye opener for me. And I realized right away that if I was going to play every day in Baltimore and for Earl Weaver, I better start doing things a little differently. And that's where I learned how to play the game. And the fans at Memorial Stadium and Oriole Magic and the way it all came together, no players in baseball could have had it any better than we did in Baltimore.
Really, 24 years Dempper in the game. You're one of only 3 guys to play in 4 decades. You, Tim McCarver, and Carlton Fisk. And you weren't a tremendous hitter, but you saved it when they needed it the most. I mean, you hit 380 something in the postseason World Series. 83, you were the most valuable player. Tell us a little bit about what changed from the season to the postseason. You cranked it up a notch.
That's a good question, Ross, because in minor leagues, when I came up out of 8 ball, Nobody in the world could get me out. I don't care what you threw. You could have thrown every spitball you wanted to throw, and you weren't going to get me out in those days. But when I came to Baltimore, Earl Weaver took me out before that Kansas City series, and he told me, he walked up to me, he said, "You see that yellow foul pole down there? I want you to hit the ball around that foul pole." So I went from a spray hitter, and a darn good spray hitter, to a pull hitter, and it was the only and the biggest mistake I ever made in the game. But in playoffs and World Series, what happened was I started to use the whole field. I didn't care about the batting average. You know how much Earl Weaver wanted a catcher, switch hitting catcher who could hit high for a batting average, get on base, that sort of thing. I couldn't do that. I wasn't that guy. I wasn't someone who was going to hit enough home runs to make him happy. I played good defense for him, but it just didn't work out. But in the playoffs, I went back, and I'll tell you a funny story because I hit 364 in A ball out of high school, and then I hit 293 or something, was MVP of an A ball league, and then 600 at instructional league one year. I hit 506 at bats with the Minnesota Twins, 304 the next year, and I was always hit high with the Yankees. But when I became an Oriole, I don't know where that swing went. So I used to get up every single night. When I had to go to the bathroom, I'd take my bat, and while my wife was sleeping, I'd take a couple of swings trying to find that old swing that I used to have. And one night she caught me, and so she took my bat away from me. But still, every single night I was in a habit. I was going to stop and take a couple of swings and see if I could find out how was it that I was such a good hitter when I was a lot younger, probably in baseball, in the minor league. Where's that swing that I had that was just unbreakable? And I couldn't do it until 20 years after I retired years ago. I'm going to the bathroom. I'm still taking my practice swings, and I had socks on. It was cold. I'll never forget. As I strided in the ball, my front foot slipped way forward, and I went to my front foot and then turned around and slid and swung. And I said to myself, "Oh my God, I've got it. I remember. I know it was in that computer. I finally got my swing back." I was only 20 years retired, though. That was the only problem. So I went to the ballpark there at Camden Yard, and I got in the batting cage, and I turned the machine on. It's throwing about 90 miles an hour. The first pitch, I threw my hands back, and I went and I strutted to my front. I went to my front foot, and I turned, pivoted on it, and hit a line drive right over what would have been second base. So I was so thankful now. For 40 years, I was the worst hitter I could possibly be. And now all of a sudden, I found it in this computer. I rebooted it finally. And now I don't have to get up and take it back. I know what I was doing wrong all these years. It's only 35 years late, that's all.
It's funny that Ross asked you that question, because I was looking at your numbers, and you didn't play much the first 5-6 years in the major leagues, in 69 through 76.
Right.
And it wasn't until 78 that you really started getting playing time. And in 78, you played in 136 games. 79, you played 124. And in 1980, you played in 119 games. Your batting averages those seasons were 259, 239, 262. And for those 3 seasons, Rick, as somebody who hadn't been much of a power hitter, you had 74 doubles in those 3 seasons, 21 home runs, not a major thing, but you drove in 113 runs. What happened? Was it the playing time that made the difference?
Yeah, it absolutely was. Not getting an opportunity to play for quite a few years, I kind of lost that swing, and then Earl wanted me to learn. So I was okay with that. I just had to make sure that my defense was always there whenever Earl wanted it in the ball game, and Palmer always wanted me to catch him, to throw guys out. He never had that many people on base to worry about it. But yeah, then also offensively, we had a couple of hitting instructors. Remember Ralph Rowe? He kind of helped me a little bit. He came out of the minor league. He was with me in Minnesota, and he kind of remembered. He tried to get me to hit the ball up the middle in the opposite way. So I got a blended group of mechanics from what Earl Weaver wanted and what what I had when I was a younger player. And I went through some decent spring, but Memorial Stadium was not a good stadium for me because I was a double hitter. I hit a lot of balls in the gap. But at Memorial Stadium, Ross, and you remember, the outfielders would bunch you towards center field because they give you the lines. And if you're really not a true pull hitter, you're not going to get a lot of hits in that stadium. So what I did, and you can look at the numbers, Stan, on the road, I hit 300. In Memorial Stadium, I hit 200. So, it was awfully tough to get a double in the gap when you've got all three guys within arm's distance of one another out there.
Ross, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Dipper, now, you left Baltimore, you went to Cleveland, you went to the Dodgers, Milwaukee, you came back to the Orioles in 94. Now, I know in 93, you started coaching. You managed, I think, in
Albuquerque.
And then you went to Albuquerque for a couple of years, won the PCL. You went to Norfolk. I think you won there as well. Now, I know you had ambitions of being a manager.
Yes, I did.
Tell me about
what happened.
Tell us about how you felt about that. Because I know you interviewed for some jobs.
Yeah.
Tell
well,
us
early on, Ross, after 1992, when I retired, I went to the Orioles. I wanted an opportunity to manage at the minor league system with them. I think they were going to give me an opportunity. I didn't know that I was going to start out and, at a high level. It didn't matter. I just wanted to learn and get a feel for managing in the Oriole organization. Well, they told me to show up on a Friday, and I did. The only problem was they didn't show up for the meeting. So I figured at that point, I got some calls from Fred Clare and the Dodgers because I'd had a pretty good run with them. And I said, okay, I don't think Baltimore really wants me there. So I went to the Dodgers. I was horrible my first year in A-ball with those guys because they were just too raw. I just didn't know how to do it. I needed a little tutoring and the art of managing at the minor league level, not worried about winning. I thought you had to win.
Right.
Anyway, my second year after Fred Clare pulled me off.
Hey, Rick, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you slide over to your right, because you're getting somehow off mic and we're not hearing all this great stuff.
Okay.
Like if you could talk like right there.
All right.
All right. Try that.
Okay. So anyway, like I said, I set up a meeting with the Orioles after I retired and wanted to start managing in their organization. But the general manager didn't show up that day. I guess he forgot about it. And at that point, I got a little upset with that situation, and I accepted the job with the Dodgers and started managing in the minor leagues for them. Well, the first year I said wasn't too good. I tried to be Earl Weaver, and that didn't work. There's only one Earl, and there were only one Earl. And Fred Clare came to me and he said, be yourself. You know the game of baseball. Just go out there and help these kids get better and get to the major leagues. So he made me the AAA manager, which was quite a vote of confidence considering I really didn't deserve it. But we ended up winning the Pacific Coast League that year, had a lot of fun, and I realized it really isn't about the winning. It's about developing a winning attitude and getting players to the major leagues. We got a lot of players to the major leagues off of that Albuquerque Duke Ball Club. I got a call from the farm director, and Tommy Lasorda had his first heart attack. Okay, it was a mild heart attack. And they started talking about who's going to replace Tommy Lasorda. So my name was thrown up by the LA Times, the media here. Maybe Rick Dempsey could come and take over. Well, that was hard for a lot of the Dodger people to think about bringing somebody in that wasn't Dodger born, bleeding blue all the time. They called me on the phone, the farm director, and said, no matter what you do, you're never going to manage the Los Angeles Dodgers. So at that point, I said, well, I guess if I'm never going to get an opportunity to manage, I should go. So I became an advanced scout for the Colorado Rockies. And boy, if you ever want to learn to be a major league manager, it ought to be a prerequisite to be an advanced scout, because
Right.
you have to go ahead of your ball club. You have to watch the other managers, how they manage the game, what pitchers are pitching good and what they do, you know. So it was an eye opener for me, because you had to take a real strong look. You're up till 2 or 3 in the morning filling out all of these statistical charts, what they call analytics today. And so and you learn a lot about the game in so doing. And then I got an opportunity. I didn't want to advance scout for long, because that is a hard job.
Right.
I got a AAA job with the New York Mets in Norfolk, Virginia, and had a pretty good run for 2 years there with the AAA teams. Benny Agbayani and a lot of good young players that ended up making it to the big. I think that's where I really learned a lot about managing. A couple good years at AAA ball, and then I interviewed for the Orioles 4 times. I came in second place, tied with all the rest of the times.
Gee, thanks.
And even though
who did you lose out to? Mazzilli?
yeah, I
Oh.
lost out to Mazzilli, and then I didn't mind losing to Buck Showalter, because I knew this guy knew how to manage.
Yeah.
So I had, but yeah, the manager for the Cleveland Indians years,
Hargrove.
Mike Hargrove. I interviewed before he did that year also. Was hoping to learn a little bit in that situation. Didn't quite work out, but anyhow, so actually a lot of people don't know that Peter Angelos had called me into his office a couple of times and said, "You're going to manage the ball club." He did it actually 3 times, but 2 times serious. Then he called me a couple of days later and he said, "Well, Rick, I'm sorry to renege my offer to manage the ball club. So some people have talked him out of it." Well, I would imagine that had to be the general managers, because that's basically what their job was. And
Yeah.
they probably talked to Earl and said, "I really need to pick my own manager." And the thing is, even though I've interviewed 6 times, I never really had a good relationship, not bad relationship. I never had a good relationship with the general manager. And usually most of them didn't really know too much about it. I almost got the Philly job when I interviewed for the Philadelphia Phillies, but then their shortstop came in. He was the last guy to
Larry Boa.
yeah. And he came in and he ended up getting the job. And they called me in and said, "Listen, we had to go with somebody that the fans knew so that we could sell tickets." And, and I said, "You know what? I'm going to thank you on his behalf, because I appreciate the loyalty and so that you showed to Larry Boa." And,
Yeah.
and I left Philadelphia. So, but, I coached for the Orioles, had a lot of fun, learned a lot about it, coaching at the Major League thing. I don't regret any of those conversations I had with Peter Angelos. I just thought he was one of the best guys I've ever met in the game. So it didn't work out, and that's just the way it is. I would have wanted to manage. I would still want to manage, but I think the light is getting a little dim there.
Rick, let me take you to some happier occasions than being passed over to manage the Orioles. You were known, because I know you got to get ready for dinner. You did something on the field. They called Mike Hargrove the human rain delay, but you were really the guy that did something special during the rain delay. We talked earlier today. You did it 3 times in Boston, in Baltimore, and Milwaukee. Can you take us through your 3 acts and
3 acts
and what brought it about?
Well, I think it was 1977, the year after I had become an Oriole. When I was a Yankee, Sparky Lyle, a great relief pitcher, used to talk about doing a pantomime of Babe Ruth hitting a home run and sliding around the tarp and sliding into home plate. And I was always waiting for Sparky to do that, but he would get baseballs during batting practice, and even though you get fined if you throw them in the grandstand, Sparky would whip them up in the grandstands to the part that would scream the loudest at him. So it looked like it was a lot of fun, and it got the fans so involved, even before the game started, and you had a lot of fun with them. So that last day, I think it was 77 in Boston, we were tied for second place, and the Yankees had already won the division, and we were just going to play for second place money. Started to rain a little bit, and I was throwing baseballs into the grandstands to all the fans. They were yelling and screaming and having a good time. It had been a good season for all of us. So anyways, we weren't going to, play in the playoffs. So they put the tarp out on the field, covered it up, and I went back into the dugout, and the fans they just wanted, I guess, more entertainment. So they started yelling and screaming. Then I saw a baseball out on the tarp. And I ran out back on the field, and I slipped a little bit, and I picked up the ball. The organist started playing Raindrops Falling on My Head, and I led them in singing the song, and they were having a great time. And then I threw the baseball into the stands, and then I left the field. Well, the fans didn't want to go home, so they started beating on the stands, and we were underneath in those locker rooms, and the noise was deafening. So Richie Dower came running in, and he said, "You got to go back out there again. Most people want you to, slide around the tarp." And I said, "I don't know what to do." And then I remembered Sparky saying he would do a pantomime of Babe Ruth hitting his home run. So that's when I went up there. I didn't know what I was doing, just being stupid and foolish. But we were always winning, so we had fun. I went out there and did the pantomime of Babe Ruth hitting the home run, running around the tarp, and then threw it into home, and everybody loved it. And so that was the beginning of the tarp act. And then I did it again in Milwaukee, kind of not a Babe Ruth pantomime, but a pantomime of Robin Yount hitting 2 home runs against us on the last day of the season. I think it was 1982.
Right.
And us losing after coming back from being down 11 and a half ball games. And Palmer pitching and losing that ball game was heartbreak, because he hadn't lost a game since May. Yeah, and but it was an end to a great season and a great comeback. And after that, then we just took over the American League.
Right.
And you did it one time in Baltimore. Do you remember the circumstances?
I did it at one time in Baltimore. Yeah, and that was the end of it. I think I wasn't putting up the big numbers, and our last championship, of course, was 83 there. And so after that, it just kind of faded out, and that's okay. It was good for a while. It was great for a while. And then all good things had to come to an end, I guess.
Ross, do you have a last question for Demper?
All of that, you pulled the El Wapo thing. We don't have time for that. That's a hilarious story.
We'll get him next time. We'll get it next time.
And I know that the time in spring training when we were playing terrible, and you come in, you threw your glove, and you're yelling and hollering, "This is not a country club. What the hell is the matter with you people?" He fires his glove in his locker, and out comes golf clubs, basketball, bracket. It's not a country club. Anyway, you're an entertainer, and I know your parents were in entertainment business. Yeah. Did you have any ambition of getting involved in that?
No, not really. My father actually was on Broadway. He was an opera singer. So he did all of that kind of entertaining. I know I've tried singing songs, rock and roll, and having good times, but
you're a damn good singer. You're a damn good singer,
Yes,
Rick.
he is.
Yes, you
are. The Invisible Oriole Band, right?
Oh yeah. They were good. The band was really good. But I've always had good times. But we had good teams, and we were always winning. And along with winning comes the good times. And we just had the best times of any group of players that have ever played this game, because it lasted a long, long time in Baltimore. We had the best fans. We didn't have the best ballpark, but we certainly had the best fans. And we came from an organization that was one of the best organizations in baseball. If you didn't learn baseball there, you better get out, because they were a fabulous ball club, and they had fabulous players.
Rick, I know we got to let you get going because you got to get to dinner, but I had one last question.
Why do I look
Orioles-
hungry?
Well, but I know you got dinner plans.
Yeah.
54, the Orioles moved to Baltimore. Through 1985, they had Harry Burkeen, George Bamberger, Ray Miller. What does that mean to an organization, and especially as important as pitching is, to have just three guys teaching the methodology?
Well, those three guys were the best, seriously, the best in the business. Bamberger and Ray Miller, they knew a lot about mechanics of pitching. And nobody stayed out on that mound very long unless they knew how to deliver a ball to home plate. Ross will tell you, they were tough on mechanics in that organization. You weren't going to pitch for the Orioles if you didn't have good mechanics. If organizations had those kind of hitting instructors, everybody would end up for a tie for first place because we just had the best. And you learn a lot from a pitching coach. You learn a lot about what a catcher has to do during the course of the game to help his pitcher get to that 8th and 9th inning, and how to handle the staff and what to look for, and basically just how to help the pitcher get better.
All right, Rick, we're going to do it again sometime, okay?
Thank you, buddy.
Dan, thank you very much.
Really appreciate
You are
it.
so,
All right.
man, you are a beautiful man.
Tell Joni, hey,
I will. I
All right.
will. Okay, you guys.
All right.
Thank
hug the
you.
grandkids.
For Ross
All right.
Grimsley and Rick Dempsey, I'm Stan the Fan Charles, and we'll see you down the road. John Moog, Wednesday night.